Good evening. Today is February 27th, 2025, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Auburn City Council to order. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Genentino is excused this evening. Councilor Kent.
Here.
Councilor Overstreet Wilson.
Here.
Councilor Cuddy.
Here.
And Councilor Clark.
Here. Please stand to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of prayer or silent reflection. Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. Clerk, are there any public announcements this evening?
Real quick, just the next planning board for the city of Auburn meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 4th at 6:30 p.m. That meeting's held here in Council Chambers, 24 South Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to the public to be heard.
At this point in time, we will open the public to be heard portion of the council meeting. Residents are asked to state their name and address for the record. Please keep remarks to 3 minutes or less, and please observe commonly accepted rules of courtesy and decorum.
Is there anyone who would like to be heard this evening? Seeing none, let's move on to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the February 20th minutes? Council meeting. So moved. Councilor Overstreet Wilson, and seconded by Councilor Cuddy. Do I have any comments on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Councilor
Councilor-
Kent. Councilor Overstreet Wilson. All good
I
with the
said
minutes?
aye.
Yeah, yes, aye.
Councilor Cuddy.
Present.
All right. Carried.
Let's go on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Councilor. Just a couple things. The Hoops Park restoration project is continuing. It's faced a few setbacks that were weather-related along the way due to the cold weather and snow. And then this last couple of days, the inflow of water into the pond has been more than our pumps could keep up with. So we expect that to work to start catching up there in the next few days. And our engineering department has been out assessing potholes. I know most of our residents are also doing that, but the engineering department's doing it in an official way so that they can be better informed for this year's road program. That presentation will be before council in the next couple of weeks as well. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Any reports from members of council? Hearing none. The next item on our agenda, we have Mr. Seth Jensen, our Director of Municipal Utilities, speaking on a couple of topics. Mr. Jensen, good evening.
Good evening. So I apologize, you're on pace for the fastest city council meeting ever, but I will certainly get in the way of that. I'm here with a couple of presentations. So yes, my name is Seth Jensen. I'm the Director of Municipal Utilities. I'm here tonight to provide council with a couple of presentations. The first one, relatively brief, however important. It's to provide a bit of a plumbing board update. So I'm not sure how many people, how many residents of the city of Auburn even realize that the city has a plumbing board. So I figured I'd start off with just a little overview of our mission and our members. For your knowledge as well as the public's knowledge, the mission statement on our website is to protect public health, safety, and welfare of residents, in particular for the installation of laterals to city sanitary, storm, and portable water main systems. I am the chair of that board. Joe Saluka is here with us as well tonight. He's our plumbing inspector. He's a board member. And then we have 3 volunteers, unpaid volunteers. There's Greg Gallinger. He is a master plumber, business owner here in Auburn, and a member of our board. Vince Clano. He is a journeyman plumber who works for Bianco Plumbing. And John Sanford is also a master plumber and business owner here in Auburn. Our secretary is Crystal Nebedomsky, and she attends all the meetings as well. They're public meetings. We hold them. We try to do it once a month or so, but occasionally, due to plumbers being busy, we're unable to have a full quorum, and we'll go every other month on occasion as well. Just to touch base a little bit on some of the board goals and what we discuss in our meetings. The primary goal of the plumbing board is really, is really to develop, administer exams, and certify new master plumbers and drain layers within the city of Auburn. The goal there being is to provide as many certified professional plumbers for the city and its residents to choose from for good competition and good pricing for our residents. Secondly, we also review and on occasion recommend updates to the local plumbing code in accordance with our mission. And additionally, the board can sometimes offer support and technical guidance to our staff, like our plumbing inspector, and or to city council pertaining to matters of plumbing. So the rules and regulations of plumbing, and I'm not sure if everyone in the city realizes this, but all residents within the city of Auburn must hire a City of Auburn master plumber to perform any plumbing work and obtain a permit to do that. There are a couple of different options that we can exercise, and I'll talk a little bit about what residents can do to perform their own plumbing work. But in general, if you're doing any plumbing work right now in our city plumbing code, that shall be done by a master plumber and or drain layer for running outside services into the home. In the next few weeks, I will be bringing forth a resolution for your review and potential approval, which will allow residents to perform fixture replacements within their own house. Right now, it is, believe it or not, illegal to replace, say, your toilet in your own home. You need to hire a master plumber. So the board has reviewed simple fixtures and certainly feels that that can be done by a resident. You just turn off your control valve, replace your fixture, turn your control valve back on, and the fixture is good to go. So that resolution will be before you, before council here in the coming weeks. Those fixtures include faucets, toilets, shower heads, garbage disposal, dishwasher, P-traps, simple plumbing related replacements. And in the past, council has made modifications to the plumbing code, and it appears as though you guys are able to do that by statute and past practice. One thing that council did change a few years back, because we were having trouble finding master plumbers who lived inside the city of Auburn to actually be on our plumbing board. We modified that code to allow for master plumbers to live outside of the city of Auburn as long as their business was within the city. They could serve on the board. So a few of our plumbing board members actually meet that criteria now, and we're able to have a full board. The plumbing board also did review the revolving loan program, make the recommendation to council along with staff to increase the maximum for the sewer and water costs. In just the last few months, we've made that modification. So for homeowners who would like to do their own work on their own home, you are certainly encouraged to reach out to our code enforcement office or plumbing inspection office and set up a residential plumbing homeowners exam. The cost is $10. If you don't pass the first time, you can take it again. And it's not an easy test. You do need to study a little bit because it wants to make sure that residents understand plumbing code, what size pipes should be connected to what fixtures. The most difficult portion, I think, on that test is to be able to draw a schematic of what a one-line plumbing diagram would look like. To me, that was the most difficult, but I think with a little bit of time and study, you know, most residents can probably pass this exam. And at that point, he or she is allowed to perform any plumbing work within their home, up to a 2-family unit. But that work is limited to the resident's principal domicile. Again, the future resolution will allow all residents, regardless of the certification, to replace simple fixtures. I think it's a good step in the right direction. And again, just a reminder that anyone performing plumbing work inside the city of Auburn is required to pull a permit. So that's my quick and dirty overview on
Excellent.
plumbing.
Any questions from council for Mr. Jensen on plumbing?
Or Mr. Salukas here as well. So.
Yes. Any questions from council? Hearing none, you can go right on now and give us an update on water and sewer rates. Thanks.
Perfect.
Since you're there.
Happy to do that. Okay. The fun one, rates. So I'll spare the introduction, but this presentation is a little bit of a shift into maybe a little bit different thought process here. So for background for council and for the public's knowledge, this isn't our first rate evaluation. It's not our first model. We've done probably 4 or 5 of these since 2016 when I was promoted to this position. I think it's an excellent opportunity not only for our comptrollers and for me and our capital project director and city management team, as well as city council, just to get a good independent third-party look at how we are doing within our water and sewer fund. They're large funds. They're big businesses, and to a certain extent deserve a good independent analysis from time to time. So we awarded a contract to GHD this past summer to conduct a reevaluation of our water and sewer rates. And since this summer through the fall, over the last 4 months, staff has been working very closely with specialists from GHD to develop the results that I'll be presenting tonight. I want to give a shout out to not only the staff at GHD. They've done an excellent job. They're patient and good to work with. Our billing department spends a lot of time, Ms. Carol Storrs, in providing documentation, multiple emails back and forth, best to understand our consumption and our billing. Our comptroller and capital projects director not only have spent a ton of time cleaning up our capital project accounts, but also countless hours either on the phone with GHD or doing research on debt service and where everything stands with respect to projection of new capital projects and existing debt service. The primary thoughts that go into a rate analysis, of course, number one is the rate itself, our past rate, our existing rate, and what future might hold for rate increases or decreases or stabilized rates. The second one is to take a good hard look at our operating expenses. We spend a lot of time not only looking at our past performance of operation and our operating history and what makes sense. Sometimes there's outliers, but really making sure that our base year is as accurate as it possibly can be, because from that base year of operating expenses, you just apply simple math to it to project out at 2 to 5% year over year increases based on inflation. In some categories inflate greater than others. And as we've seen over the last 5 years, inflation has really been a challenge for every sector across the country. Our revenues have, our revenues have remained relatively flat. They're stable. We haven't had a significant uptick or decline in revenues in past years. And revenues and consumption kind of go hand in hand, right? So they're both, for all intents and purposes, within this model, assumed to be flat. We know that there are new developments out there. I'll give you Cuga Milk Ingredients, for example, their new addition. There'll likely be revenue there, an additional revenue, but we don't know exactly what that is. They can tell us what that's gonna be and when they think that's gonna hit, but to throw that into the model with so many unknowns out there, our consultant decided that it would be best to remain conservative and just project flat consumption based on past performance and history. And then our capital planning. You know me, I'm very aggressive when it comes to reinvestment, and you as a council have been extremely supportive with that. And with that thought process, it creates a lot of turmoil and congestion in our finance office as well as our capital projects office to figure out where all these numbers are coming from, going to, and what they're going to look like. So a lot of time is spent there. And then of course our fund balance health. How does our savings account look? What should that look like? And what do we do? Should we try to grow that and get creative with you know, using savings to spend versus bonding and taking out loans to spend? So I covered a lot on that first slide, and some of this will be repetitive, so I apologize, or I'll just likely skip over it, but we'll start on the water side. In 2022, City Council approved a rate increase, a fairly significant rate increase, that is, from $262 to $335. At that point in time, it was decided to set a 5-year rate, set it and forget it, and $335 should be the number that gets us from 2022 to 2027. The thought being that we would over collect the first 2 years, break even in year 3, and then potentially under collect in years 4 and 5. So over the entire planning horizon of 5 years, that new rate would break us even. Does that make sense? So we are almost through that. We have one more year to go. And I will be able to provide you some information on how that's holding up at this point. We did see over the last few years significant increase in our operating expenses in both water and sewer. I don't think that that's anything to be you know, surprised about, with chemical costs going up through the roof, you know, health insurance costs being at a premium now, and our revenues generally have remained fairly stable and consistent. So some of the assumptions that went into the water model was that, you know, we looked at the past consumption, the 3-year average, and then just projected that consumption average forward. Our expenses, now that we're kind of over that, hopefully over the inflation bubble, we're seeing chemicals and other operating expenses start to fall back within the 2 to 5% year-over-year range, which is good, and hopefully continues to you know, play out that way over the 5-year planning horizon that this model is intended to encompass. For as far as future debt goes, for both water and sewer, and you'll hear more about this from Ms. Selvik during the capital plan presentation, but we're proposing, both in water and sewer, no new borrowing for 2026 in water and sewer fund, but we have some significant projects already underway and ways to potentially start to advance other projects, and she'll talk about that in more detail. But one thing that the comptroller is looking at too is moving some of our bands, which are like a short-term loan for 5 years, sooner than later, and rolling them into long-term financing. There's a cost to that up front, but the long-term impact is beneficial potentially to do that. So we've incorporated some placeholders into this model that would account for that to happen. So our short-term outlook for the water model is positive. We're seeing expenses fall back within reason. Our consumption is strong, and we don't anticipate any short-term borrowing. Over the long term, we have built into this model a fairly significant investment in terms of water fund cash to support the raw water intake extension and or a transmission main replacement between the upper pump station and the water filtration plant. That's a really old section of water main. Both projects have been contemplated now for a few years, and you know, we might look to start to move the design planning portion of that forward soon, and then we included the financial burden of that project in out years. Over the long term, the rate model does suggest that we may want to slightly begin to raise rates to prepare ourselves for future investment and inflation. So this is the first model, which shows no rate increases over a 5-year planning horizon. The red line, the straight red line at the top, is our total revenue, and it's straight because this model shows no rate increase for 5 years, so it's flat consumption, flat billing, flat revenue. Our expenses were a little bit higher this year than our revenue, at least in our original budget, but that shows a dip, and then as the expenses increase, that is showing that the reinvestment in infrastructure like the raw water transmission main replacement or the intake extension project. And at the bottom you can see fund balance. So from this model, the do nothing option over 5 years, it doesn't look great, but that makes sense. Expenses tend to go up over time, and we need to match those expenses without additional consumption. The second model that GHD put together for us is fairly similar, but it shows a rate increase of 3% in 27, 28 and 29 through 30. And even at that rate adjustment schedule, we do see a minor dip in the out years of fund balance. The third rate model, the one with the asterisk next to it, staff recommended, is a 2% annual increase each year to our rate. Stabilizes revenue, it grows our fund balance, it allows us to potentially start to cash flow projects instead of bonding and borrowing for projects. And it's not a significant increase each year. You know, 2% is more. Don't get me wrong. I know that it's more, but at 7 cents, if you're a 10, 20 unit user, you know, it's $1 more. Yes, sir.
Mr. Jensen, what is how do our rates compare to other cities our size?
That's my capstone slide at the end.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. That's a very good question.
The punch.
Yes. Yep. And I think it's really interesting. So I just want to skip ahead to that and go get this thing over with.
No. Go take
All
your
right.
time. Take your time.
All right. Any other questions on the water before I flip over to sewer?
I
Yes.
just have one question. So when you discussed a moment ago about the raw water intake pipe, is that to deal with, extending that to deal with the issues with the blooms and the microsystems?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? Good. I should back up here. Just one more thing related to the water model is we projected the 5-year rate at even back to this first one right here, flat revenue. That's our wholesale water agreements as they exist today. And council understands that we are currently in a negotiation right now working through wholesale water pricing with those customers. So that could change depending on what the outcome of that study, that cost of service analysis shows us, and what our long-term wholesale water agreements look like. So regardless, it's probably going to be a good idea this time next year to be having a similar conversation once we are able to get through that process, because that will affect that red line. Either way you slice it, it's going to affect it in either one of these models.
Mr. Jensen, and when you say flat revenue, it's conservative, it's not including, like you mentioned, Hugo Milk Ingredients projects or any other business growth that might improve that. We're keeping that out of this, but it's a possibility.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, even on the other side of things, you know, with the loss of local coho, we provided that information to our consultant as soon as we heard that was potentially happening, so they could rerun the numbers. And it was such a minimal impact to the grand scheme of things. Now, you know, Nucor is a super important customer of the city of Auburn, not only from a water standpoint, but for the city as a whole. I don't want to show what that looks like. So moving on to sewer. Fairly similar story, but with sewer we touched the rate just last year. We made a modest adjustment from 478 to 492 when I first started working for the city of Auburn 16 years ago. Sewer rate was 478. We couldn't find when that rate had actually been changed to that number. It has been 478 for the longest time. So that was a good adjustment around some uncertainty with our significant biosolids project. Sewer was much more complicated as a result of that project. But just like in water, we've seen our expenses increase over the last few years because of inflation, to do with chemicals and also to do with our biosolids removal. One significant item that happened last year was the debt from our investment in our 90s plant upgrade dropped off. So that was a big win for the sewer fund, and makes some room for this project that we're doing now. Again, revenue is relatively flat, consumption is stable, and the sewer fund balance is relatively stable right now as well. So the model assumptions is consumption will remain flat in the short term, even though we understand that Hugo Milk Ingredients is, you know, adding all of this new capacity potentially at their plant. Expenses have normalized, so 2 to 5% depending on which operating expense category is generally a good rule of thumb for inflation. For this model, and I'll have to break it out with budget here in just a few months, we lumped all the biosolids related savings and expenses into one category. within our operating budget. It impacts so many different lines within our existing budget that we just put it all into one for this model. There's a line in there for an additional staff member. There's a significant decrease in just less solids. Solids will be cheaper to sell per ton, or to get rid of per ton. But there's also new equipment, so there's operating expenses associated with that new equipment. Natural gas expenses will change. All of that went into one line item. Again, future debt, short term, no new borrowing in 2026. Similar strategy as was discussed in water, with potentially looking to move bans into sewer bonds, long-term borrowing. And then in 27, 28, that's when the significant borrowing will start to need to be repaid out of the sewer fund. So very similar to water, believe it or not. And to me, this is like the biggest success story for a relatively small utility, to be able to spend $90+ million on a capital project at our wastewater treatment plant and be able to come up in front of council tonight and say short-term outlook is positive. That doesn't happen. That's like unheard of. So, you know, kudos to Christina and our comptroller and the whole team for patiently developing and systematically rolling this project out in a way that is affordable to the city residents here in Auburn. So we'll start to see the benefits of the biosolids as soon as this year. That'll be a highlight of my budget presentation. There is some repayment on existing debt. And again, no new borrowing. Long-term, the debt associated with biosolids and the expenditure associated with the CSO upgrades and sewer separation was built in to the 5-year planning horizon. So an additional spend on more capital outside of the wastewater treatment plant within our collection system is there. Assuming flat consumption, we do start to see a slow decline of fund balance in the out years. So this is the model with no rate increase. It's pretty positive to continue to see fund balance rise. The only hesitation I have is the blue line, which is our expenses, and the red line converge. You'd rather see those lines be in parallel than converging. So we did a couple of different rate scenarios to present to council to try to adjust for that convergence and to stay ahead of things a bit. This one is a delayed rate increase, waiting till fiscal year 27 and fiscal year 28, and including two small 2% rate increases. You can see that starts to bridge the gap, but there's still some convergence of expenses and revenue. The last model, and again, this one has the asterisks, and at the bottom you can see staff recommended. That's not just me. I made sure that I talked to Mary Beth and Christina and others to ensure that we're all on the same page with our recommendation, but would be to, just like with water, move forward year after year with small rate increases, build fund balance for the unknowns, the unexpecteds, as well as to potentially start to turn the dial from a reactive utility management system to a proactive utility management system. And I don't think there's not many of them out there that are municipally run that are able to say that they proactively can manage their utilities with cash. And if we could get to that place, that would be pretty utopia for a municipal utility director. but I understand there's many other pressures out there that you face as city councilors. Any questions on the sewer model? Any questions, Jeff?
Big reveal now, the last slide.
Yeah. So here's and I got to give credit to Sam Granado. Sam at our water filtration plant, he's an operator there, was happy to take on this task to make phone calls to Geneva and look on the internet as well. I'm sure Geneva, Oswego, Watertown, and Batavia, all similar size cities in upstate New York. We are the dark blue bar on the left, and you can see in every single case, from 10 units to 20 to 30 to 40. And I would say the average usage for a household of 4 is probably somewhere between 10 and 20. We're holding the line. We're really doing well for all-in water and sewer quarterly bills. We're under $200 at that 20 units. The national average for water and sewer for the average customer is $500 a quarter. So our consultant GHD provided me a white paper from Bluefield Research that they subscribe to, and within that, this is the national average. The Northeast average was actually $600 a quarter. But if you think about it, most municipalities outside the city of Auburn, towns and villages, they have a water bill to pay for their water usage, but then they also have a district bill where they're paying up to $1,000 a year on their taxes for the capital investment in their district or in the water treatment plant or whatever. We don't have that. We're all within one singular rate within the city of Auburn that covers capital and operating. And we're super competitive, and I can't think or believe that we'll pick on the city of Watertown because they're the big one. I can't believe that their services are better than ours. Their water quality at the tap is better than ours. If you have a water main break at your house or outside of your house on a Sunday afternoon, that they're getting a better response time than what we provide. We're there within an hour. Within 3 hours, the crew's there likely digging and fixing that water main, and within 4, service has been restored. They've done all, this whole winter has been a mess for these guys, but they've knocked it out. So I'm pretty confident that just because our rate's low, our services aren't cut too much more than any one of those other municipalities or the national average.
Thank you. It was a great final slide.
Well, that's not my final slide.
I'm sorry. Continue.
I'm just warming up. There's 10 more. No, there's one more. One more. This is so that's the wow factor. This is the bring it home. Final recommendations, all right? So I'm going to recommend, whether you guys get hate mail or not, that we adopt a strategy whereby a moderate rate increase in both water and sewer can be accomplished on an annual basis. This will help us to, in some ways, plan for the unknown, because we still have a lot of that. We're sitting on 100-year-old infrastructure. There's sewer lines running out front of City Hall that are brick line that are doing what they did 100 years ago, that could fail at any moment, that gets expensive. So it's good to have a good reserve fund and potentially start to cash flow our projects rather than financing them. Just like you would at your own home. I have friends, I'm not one of those people, but I have friends who are good with money, who bought their first car with a loan, and then for the rest of their adult life never bought another car with a loan because they paid off their car, they continue to make those payments, They saved up the piggy bank, they trade in their car, and they use that cash balance that they saved to buy their next car. And then they did it again, and then they did it again. If we can get ourselves into that situation, the amount of money that we pay on interest for these large projects, just like you do for your house, the first mortgage payment you make is 95, 99% interest, 1% towards principal. We can start to get ahead of ourselves. Second one is these rate evaluations are good. There's going to be a lot of changes over the next year in water around our wholesale discussion, and sewer around the operation, and maintenance at our wastewater treatment plant. I think we should think about potentially doing this again, maybe even as soon as next year, just because of all those changes. Normally, I wouldn't recommend every single year, probably every other year, just to touch base and make sure we're on track is good. Fourth is to continue to seek partnership with state and federal agencies. Christina has been a critical asset to the city. If we could get 4 more of her, keep cloning her, that would be fantastic, because the amount of money that we've been able to secure through those partnerships is absolutely astounding and makes these projects happen. 5 is continue to reinvest in our infrastructure. One of the things that Christina will be talking about in her capital plan, if she dives into that level of granularity, I'm not sure, would be to do an inflow and infiltration study. Not only is that good to understand the bad parts of our sewer collection system that are taking on a lot of inflow, it helps us to understand our capacity, our pinch points. It's good for economic development, because if we know where they are, we can create more capacity by investing dollars in the right places within our system. Consider moving forward with the sewer separation and CSO project, maybe sometime within this planning horizon. The design is complete. We're just waiting to make sure that everything shakes out financially, and we're in a healthy place to pull the trigger and move forward with that. Maybe that's a couple of years out. Potentially issue an RFQ and initiate the raw water intake extension, transmission main replacement project. We have available cash within existing capital projects to potentially move that forward. And then continue to support the sewer and water rehab work throughout the city, either through local bonding, our traditional approach, or if we can start to build a capital reserve, that would be the preferred method, and do it with cash. And last but not least, we're continuing forward with our wholesale customers. We need to continue to collaborate. They're 20 to 30% of our total revenue. They're an integral part of the water and sewer fund, and we need to continue to strengthen those relationships.
Mr. Jensen, on that last one, you've done a lot of work over the last 6 years plus coordinating with the various towns and villages, the wholesale customers. With all the investment that you've showcased in these slides, there's a methodology that you've established. Mm-hmm. And how have the towns and villages have they been receptive to moving forward in these intermunicipal relationships? Because the city's done a really good job in getting everyone on the same page. I remember when I first started on council, every town and village had their own agreement, and timing was this year and another town was that year, and so are they receptive to being on the same page and moving forward together?
On the sewer side, I would say ever since we struck that agreement with our wholesale customers, that we've been 100% on that same page. We've been able to bring new supervisors up to speed based on some of the older supervisors and other folks' experience, and talking through that process.
And I know GHD was instrumental in that.
They were helpful with that, and they're helping us as well with the wholesale water. That's relatively new still. We've only had one meeting. We have another meeting tomorrow morning with that group. It could be a little bumpy at first. You know, there's a lot of old feelings and animosity in the water sector too. We were able to cut through that with sewer, but there was 4 wholesale sewer customers. With water, there's 4 immediate wholesale water customers, but there's like 12 total. And by the time it gets, there's some old feelings in there. It's gonna take. It might take more time, but if we follow a similar process and we're open with them, and
I think that was the key for
Yeah.
sewer, you know, so yes, I'm looking forward to that process, but again, it was a huge accomplishment for sewer, and I know that it's daunting to do the same with water, but I think the intent, the methodology, and the transparency by which we built trust with the towns and villages paid off in the long run for everyone.
Yeah.
Because everyone benefits. It's not so that there's no sense of like, well, someone's taking advantage of so-and-so. This is, as long as we keep it transparent,
Yeah.
I think everyone should be able to agree that.
I hope so.
I hope
Yeah,
so.
there's a lot of old feelings. You know, a lot of city versus, you know,
Yeah.
and it's. Hopefully, it's just old because I don't come with that same thought process in my brain. I
And if
haven't.
GHD presents it in a way that's, like,
Makes sense,
yeah, third party, there's no, you know, the numbers are the numbers.
right?
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Jensen? Mr. Dygert, anything? No?
Good.
Good presentation. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
Do we have any other business from council this evening? Hearing none. Mr. Dygert, do we have a call for executive session this evening?
Regrettably, I do not have anything for executive session.
No call for executive session from Mr. Dygert. How about from any members of city council? Hearing none. I'll adjourn, right?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to
5:46
adjourn,
PM.
right? Counselor Overstreet Wilson, seconded by Counselor Clarko.
Counselor Kent,
Yes.
Counselor Overstreet Wilson,
Yes.
Counselor Cuddy,
Yes.
and Counselor Clark.
Aye.
Adjourn.
Meeting's adjourned.